The city seemed to carry on with its usual pace, but something dark was happening behind the scenes. For many families, a simple grocery store had become a financial nightmare. Abusive charges, inflated prices, and fraudulent contracts were destroying lives. When Tom, an observant and just man, noticed that something was wrong, he decided to investigate. What he discovered was far more than he expected. He was about to face a criminal network that preyed on the most vulnerable. But would he be able to expose those responsible and restore hope to these people? If you want to know how this thrilling story unfolds, stay until the end. Leave your like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Also, activate the notification bell so you don't miss more impactful stories like this one. Now sit back and get ready for a journey full of tension, courage, and justice. The city of Los Angeles buzzes in its frenetic rhythm. Wide avenues are dominated by heavy traffic, where honks sound like a chaotic urban symphony. Luxury cars share space with vehicles worn down by time, creating a stark contrast between the shine of wealth and the harsh reality of the working class. On bustling sidewalks, enchanted tourists attempt to capture the glamour of Hollywood with their cameras, while street performers try to earn a few bucks with impromptu acts. The glow of the stars on the Walk of Fame momentarily blinds the raw truth of the backstreets where survival is a daily struggle. However, just a few blocks from the tourist attractions, the atmosphere changes drastically. The buildings grow older, worn down by time and economic hardship. The once vibrant facades now show signs of neglect, graffiti, cracked windows, and faded posters of long-past events. The contrast is striking. The glamorous side of Los Angeles abruptly gives way to a version of the city that many prefer to ignore. It is in this setting that the Golden Mart stands, an apparently simple market situated on a strategic corner among humble neighborhoods. The facade is faded, with signs whose lights flicker irregularly. The windows display seemingly irresistible promotions, but there is something deceitful in the promises of savings plastered on poorly affixed posters. For many residents of the area, the Golden Mart is not just a market but a necessity, the only accessible place to buy essentials, despite the high prices and exhausting experience. Inside, the market is stuffy and poorly lit. The fluorescent lights flicker annoyingly, casting intermittent shadows on the narrow aisles. The shelves are disorganized, filled with products near or past their expiration dates, displaying faded price tags that contrast with the surprisingly high numbers. Torn rice packages, dented cans of vegetables, and dusty cereal boxes mix with unknown brands that would hardly sell anywhere else. The air smells of cheap cleaning products and spoiled food, creating a bittersweet sense of neglect and exploitation. Customers walk the aisles with heavy steps, downcast eyes, and weary expressions. Mothers with restless children try to mentally calculate how much they can take without breaking the week's budget. Elderly people with reusable bags carefully examine prices, hesitating before choosing an item. The tension is palpable. There is a constant sense of surveillance, as if every customer's movement is being evaluated and judged. Tom Cruise, seeking a moment of anonymity away from the flashes and glamour that surround his public image, enters the market discreetly. A low-brimmed cap and dark sunglasses partially hide his face, but his natural charisma and confident posture are hard to disguise. He observes the environment carefully, absorbing every detail. He is a man accustomed to playing heroes on screen, facing villains and extreme danger. But at that moment, he feels like any other citizen trying to grasp the weight of daily struggles. As he walks through the aisles, he notices the wary glances of the employees. Young workers in worn-out uniforms roam with apparent disinterest, but their eyes reveal constant vigilance. They seem trained to detect any suspicious movement, to suppress any attempt at questioning or resistance. Some exchange quick whispers among themselves, averting their eyes whenever a customer hesitates while checking prices. Tom notices that many customers hold flyers promoting easy credit and long-term installment plans. The small print, almost unreadable, indicates abusive interest rates, but the promise of financial relief is tempting for those in desperate need. A tired-looking woman clutches one of these flyers while considering a can of powdered milk, clearly wondering if she can afford it. The market manager, Vincent Crowe, stands out among the aisles as an imposing figure. His gaze is firm, almost icy, and his rigid posture conveys an authority that borders on intimidation. He walks with steady steps, observing customers and employees like a predator guarding his territory. His neatly combed hair and slightly disheveled suit suggest someone who tries to appear respectable, but whose essence is stained by something dark. When a customer takes too long to decide what to buy, Vincent discreetly approaches, evaluating the situation with a critical stare. The customer's discomfort is visible. They quickly pick something and move on, as if trying to escape silent judgment. Tom continues to observe, intrigued and unsettled. He notices that many customers leave the market with lowered heads, some muttering under their breath, others discreetly wiping away frustrated tears. A young couple, clearly distressed, examines their receipt as they walk to the exit, and Tom catches the disbelief and anger on their faces. It seems that something there goes beyond high prices or expired products. There is a power dynamic and exploitation that surpasses the market's negligent appearance. Tom's sharp instincts, honed after years of intense action films and thrillers, trigger a warning. It didn't seem like a typical economic exploitation. There was something deeper, something calculated. The figure of Vincent Crowe, observing everything with the coldness of someone who feeds on others' vulnerability, unsettles Tom in a way he can't ignore. A sense of justice compels him to understand what is really happening there. That market, masked as a necessity, seemed to be a trap for the most vulnerable, an invisible predator hidden among dirty shelves and expired goods. Tom leaves the market burdened by what he has witnessed, but with the determination of someone who has faced the impossible on screen. He knew he would need to return, observe more, and understand the dark details sustaining that place. The Golden Mart was not just a market, it was a symbol of exploitation, a cruel reflection of the city's inequalities. And Tom Cruise, even without cameras or scripts, was determined to uncover the truth. When Tom finally approaches the checkout to pay for a few bottles of water, he notices an elderly woman holding a small basket with just a few items: a can of soup, a package of cookies, and a liter of milk. Her face is marked by time and the weight of accumulated worries. Her trembling hands clutch a handful of worn-out coins, which she tries to organize carefully. The cashier, a young man with a bored expression, stares at her, tapping his fingers impatiently on the counter. The woman, nervous, hesitates as she tries to calculate if her money will be enough to cover the purchase. Each failed attempt seems to tighten her chest further, and the cashier's exasperated sighs only add to her shame. The coins slip from her fingers, falling onto the counter and rolling to the floor. A brief moment of silence follows, heavy with embarrassment. The elderly woman bends down to pick up the coins, and Tom watches intently, while other customers avert their eyes, pretending not to see. After an impatient exchange of glances and a curt wave from the cashier, the woman is forced to leave one of the products behind. The defeated expression on her face is hard to ignore. With hunched shoulders, she puts the remaining coins in her pocket and slowly walks toward the exit, taking only part of what she needed. Tom feels a tightness in his chest, a familiar sense of helplessness in the face of the everyday cruelty that life can hide. As he leaves the market, Tom spots a young man leaning against a nearby wall with a frustrated expression. There is something worn out in his posture, his head down, shoulders tense, and hands clenched by his sides. Driven by intuition and growing concern, Tom approaches. Discreetly, without drawing attention, he begins a casual conversation, trying to understand what had happened. The young man initially hesitates, reluctant to open up to a stranger, but Tom's genuine empathy soon encourages him to share. The young man talks about his experience with the market, revealing an even more disturbing reality. He explains that once, he needed to buy groceries for his sick mother, but didn't have enough money. The cashiers quickly offered him a solution, a store credit card with promises of small installments and extended terms. Desperate, the young man accepted. However, what seemed like a helping hand soon became an unbearable burden. The interest rates were absurd, and missed payments led to unexpected charges, unbearable fines, and intimidating phone calls. He had already received several collection calls, where harsh and impatient voices demanded immediate payment. threatening to put his name on delinquent lists and compromise any future credit opportunities. Tom listens carefully, absorbing every detail. The young man's voice trembles as he speaks, fluctuating between restrained anger and resigned frustration. He also shares that when he tried to renegotiate the debt, he was taken to a small room at the back of the market. There, Vincent Crowe awaited him, accompanied by two heavy-set employees. Vincent's expression was cold and calculating, analyzing the young man as if he were a problem to be eliminated. Without raising his voice, but with a tone heavy with veiled threat, Vincent made it clear that there would be no more extensions. The young man vividly remembers the intimidating gaze of one of the guards who crossed his arms, intensifying the sense of intimidation. In the days that follow, Tom decides he needs to understand more. He begins frequenting the market regularly, sometimes in disguise, blending in with the daily routine of the regular customers. He spends hours quietly observing, searching for patterns, identifying suspicious behaviors. With each visit, he uncovers a new aspect of the web of exploitation that surrounds the Golden Mart. He talks to a single mother struggling to support her two young children. She shares that in a moment of desperation, she signed a payment plan contract to buy milk and diapers. However, upon reading the fine print more carefully, she realized that the interest rates doubled the purchase amount each month. When she tried to cancel the contract, she was informed that breaking it would result in a penalty greater than her initial debt. Another woman, a nurse working exhausting shifts, reports receiving frequent collection calls, always followed by intimidating messages. Sometimes she found printed notes left at her door, reminding her that Golden Mart doesn't forget its debts. She lived in a constant state of alert, fearing someone might invade her privacy to collect what she couldn't pay. The more Tom listens, the more Vincent Crowe's figure emerges as a haunting threat. Vincent is not just the store manager, he is the architect of a meticulously planned exploitation system. His presence in the market is constant, but he rarely interacts with customers. His conversations with employees are brief, always authoritative. The employees seem to respect and fear him simultaneously, following his orders without question. Tom observes the power dynamics, the diverted glances when Vincent passes by, the rigidity of the cashiers around him. There is something undeniably cruel about his behavior, an aura of absolute control. With each passing day, Tom's indignation grows. He knows this goes beyond greed. It is a deliberate, systematic, and merciless exploitation of the most vulnerable. The stories accumulate in his mind, each more disturbing than the last. He feels the weight of responsibility to do something, to not let this injustice go unchecked. The Golden Mart is not just a corrupt market, it is a predator masked as opportunity, a monster hidden behind disorganized shelves and faded signs. Something needs to be done, and Tom knows he cannot ignore it. After weeks of careful and meticulous observation, Tom realized that merely witnessing the abuses of the Golden Mart would not be enough. The disturbing stories he had heard, the weary faces of the exploited customers, and the ruthless presence of Vincent Crowe haunted him each day. It was time to go beyond the surface. He needed concrete evidence, something that could expose without a doubt the full extent of the criminal scheme Vincent orchestrated. On a quiet night, when the flow of customers had slowed and the younger employees were preparing to close, Tom returned to the market. Outside, the city continued its frenetic pace, but there, in the shadows of the dimly lit parking lot, everything seemed suspended. Tom's heart raced as he crossed the nearly empty space, his calm expression concealing the tension consuming him. He knew that night could be decisive. His steps led him to the back of the market, where there was a narrow door marked clearly with a sign, "Employees only." He looked around to ensure no employees were watching, and noticed that Vincent had retreated to his office, giving him a brief window of opportunity. The air was filled with the sour smell of expired products and cheap cleaning supplies. Dusty shelves held worn-out boxes and torn packaging, amplifying the sense of neglect. Tom pressed his ear against the door, listening carefully for any sounds from the other side. The silence was heavy, interrupted only by the buzzing of fluorescent lights. He tried the doorknob, locked. He had anticipated this possibility and, with a quick gesture, pulled a paperclip from his pocket. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing. He bent the clip skillfully, turning it into an improvised tool. He pushed it into the lock, feeling the resistance of the mechanism. Time seemed to drag as he carefully worked to open the door without drawing attention. Finally, a quiet click echoed, and the doorknob gave way. Inside, the storage room was dark, stuffy, and oppressive. The only light came from a distant bulb covered in dust and cobwebs. Stacks of boxes formed a chaotic maze. Walking cautiously, Tom searched the room, looking for any trace of documentation. That was when he saw a metal cabinet partially hidden by boxes. The padlock seemed sturdy, but the same improvised clip helped him unlock it after a few careful attempts. When he opened the cabinet, Tom's heart pounded. Inside, there was a surprising amount of documents: contracts with confusing and abusive clauses, lists of indebted customers with exorbitant amounts, detailed financial reports, and collection notes with aggressive tones. Some papers contained customers' personal information, addresses, phone numbers, and even medical records, data used to further pressure the debtors. It was a meticulous and ruthless exploitation. Each document was a piece of a dark puzzle revealing the extent of Vincent's control over the community. As he quickly examined the papers, distant voices caught his attention. The muffled echo of footsteps drew closer. Tom swiftly gathered as many documents as he could, stuffing them hastily into his backpack. He turned off his phone, fearing any sound that might reveal his presence. Desperately looking around, he spotted a pile of stacked boxes near the cabinet. He crouched behind them, controlling his breathing. Vincent entered the storage room, accompanied by two burly security guards. Their voices were firm but low, almost as if they were sharing dark secrets. Hidden in the shadows, Tom listened carefully as they discussed Mrs. Henderson, a respected and well-known figure in the community. Vincent's words were calculated, cold, and full of threat. He wanted to make her an example, something that would intimidate other customers. His goal was not just to collect debts, but to reinforce fear and submission. The guards chuckled quietly, as if they were accustomed to such conversations. Tom's stomach twisted. Vincent's disproportionate cruelty was revealed without any disguise. He was in the presence of someone who manipulated lives as easily as he organized the papers in that cabinet. Tom remained motionless, waiting until Vincent and his men walked away. Silence returned to the room, heavy and suffocating. Cautiously, Tom left the storage room, his senses heightened for any movement. He exited the market quickly, crossing the deserted parking lot with the unsettling feeling of being watched. The night air was cold, but the sweat on his forehead burned. Only when he locked the door of his apartment and dropped the backpack on the floor did he finally exhale deeply. In the following days, Tom meticulously analyzed every document he had collected. The more he read, the more evident it became that this was not just economic exploitation. That system of oppression and psychological control was a carefully planned mechanism to suppress any attempt at resistance. He knew that acting alone would be reckless. Vincent had enough power and influence to retaliate mercilessly. That was when he sought out Alex Carter, a private investigator he knew from Hollywood's backstage, a man experienced in handling complex and delicate investigations. Alex was shocked by the depth of the scheme and immediately understood that this was not just a case of financial fraud, but a sophisticated organized crime operation. The decision was unanimous. They needed someone who could bring this truth to the public in a powerful and secure way. They contacted Elena Torres, a renowned investigative journalist known for fearlessly confronting corporate and political giants. Elena was stunned by the scheme's extent and the vulnerability of the victims. For weeks, the three worked in secret, gathering more testimonies, photographing documents, and strengthening the case with as much evidence as possible. Initially hesitant, the victims began to trust Tom, Alex, and Elena. They felt that finally, there was a chance for justice. The day of the plan's execution arrived. Disguised as a debt-ridden customer, Elena entered the market. Her anxious demeanor and hesitant posture caught the attention of the employees. Vincent noticed her and approached with his usual cynical smile. He surrounded her with easy promises and false sympathy, offering more credit and pushing a new contract full of unfair clauses. Meanwhile, Tom and Alex positioned themselves strategically, attentive to every detail. Elena's hidden camera captured everything: Vincent's threatening tone, his deliberate manipulation, the psychological pressure disguised as help. The atmosphere seemed to freeze when Vincent demanded an immediate signature, making it clear that there was no easy way out. Tom felt the weight of the moment. He knew this was more than just a recording. It was a direct confrontation with someone who controlled lives as if they were disposable pieces in a game of power. He felt adrenaline coursing through his veins, the responsibility to expose the truth while protecting those who had placed their trust in him. Before Elena could sign the contract, pressured by Vincent Crow's intimidating presence, Tom stepped in beside her with a firm and determined stride. His stance was imposing, his gaze sharp, carrying the determination of someone who had already decided to face any consequences to prevent another act of exploitation. The tension in the air was palpable. The sound of Tom's footsteps seemed to echo throughout the market, each step heavier than the last, as if justice itself was approaching to demand due reckoning. Vincent's eyes met Tom's, and for a moment, his mask of absolute control wavered. The recognition was immediate. Vincent knew who that man was, not just the famous actor, but someone whose strong presence suggested something greater, something uncontrollable. Silence fell across the market as if all the customers, employees, and even the disorganized shelves awaited the conclusion of that unexpected scene. Tom, maintaining his steady gaze, revealed the backpack he carried, filled with the documents he had carefully collected. Slowly, without hurry, he began to pull out the papers, displaying fraudulent contracts, lists of indebted customers, manipulated financial records, and threatening reports. Each document was concrete proof of Vincent's criminal scheme, and the impact hit like one blow after another. Vincent's expression began to change, from calculated cynicism to a mix of disbelief and fear. The customers around them, who had previously been inattentive, now gathered closer, curious and cautious. Some recognized their names on the exposed papers, their insurmountable debts, their signatures forced by desperation. Murmurs of indignation gradually grew, a muffled sound that began to spread like wildfire. Some took out their cell phones, recording the moment. There was a sense of catharsis in the air. For so long, these people had been silenced, humiliated, treated as less than human, but now they witnessed the vulnerability of the man who had terrorized them. Vincent's face turned red, his wavering expression shifting between anger and denial. He took a step forward, teeth clenched, trying to regain control of the situation. His gaze, once cold and calculating, now revealed panic. The silent threat he once used to intimidate employees and customers no longer had the same power. The guards beside him, once silent accomplices, exchanged hesitant looks, realizing that something greater was unfolding. The weight of the evidence was crushing. Suddenly, the market doors burst open, echoing loudly through the aisles. Police officers entered in formation, led by the detective assigned to the case, summoned in advance by Alex Carter. The sight of uniforms and holstered weapons brought an even deeper silence to the market. All eyes turned to Vincent, who now seemed cornered, a predator trapped, unable to escape his own snare. The detective approached Vincent, his posture rigid and professional. The look he gave the manager was stern, like someone who had finally found the culprit behind a crime that had silently haunted that community for so long. Vincent tried to resist, his voice choking on words that never fully formed. The officer's hands gripped his arms firmly as he was restrained and handcuffed before the gaze of those he had exploited for so long. The cold, final click of the handcuffs sealed his fate. The market, long a scene of exploitation and abuse, became a stage for justice. The customers present, mothers, elderly people, exhausted workers, watched with expressions of relief, surprise, and satisfaction. Some cried quietly, releasing years of pent-up frustration. Others embraced, sharing the feeling of finally being heard. Elena Torres' news team captured every detail, every expression, every incredulous look, ensuring the truth would reach far beyond that forgotten neighborhood. Outside, as Vincent was led to the police car, Tom remained silent. The adrenaline still coursed through his body, but there was a profound sense of relief. His intention had never been recognition or fame. He only wanted justice for those who had no voice. Alex Carter approached, briefly touching his shoulder, a silent gesture of respect and solidarity. Elena, with teary eyes, grasped the significance of the historic moment she had just documented. In the following days, Vincent Crow's arrest became national news. Images of his arrest circulated on social media, in newscasts, and in investigative articles. The public exposure was intense, and the victims were finally heard on a wider scale. A movement of denunciation and solidarity emerged, inspired by the courage of Tom, Alex, and Elena. Justice did not stop at Vincent's arrest. A thorough investigation revealed the extent of the criminal scheme and the complexity of the exploitative network sustaining the Golden Mart. The stolen money was recovered, and an emergency aid fund was created to support the affected families. The market was permanently closed, and in its place, a community center was established, offering legal support, psychological assistance, and financial resources to those in need. The impact of that day resonated in every corner of the neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson, once a silent figure marked by oppression, became a symbol of resistance. Her image, once weary, now carried the strength of someone who had faced a nightmare and survived. Nearby communities, inspired by that neighborhood's courage, began to report similar situations, demanding justice for themselves. Tom watched everything from a distance. His discreet presence at the reopening of the community space was met with genuine gratitude. He declined interviews and avoided the spotlight. His purpose was never to be a hero on screens or magazine covers, but someone willing to fight against real injustice. When he saw children running through the new community center, the smiling faces of families and the hopeful looks of those who had once lived under the weight of fear, he knew that something truly meaningful had been achieved. For Los Angeles, that story became a reminder that justice is not a distant or unattainable concept. It is a constant struggle, fought by those who refuse to remain silent. And sometimes, heroes are just ordinary people who care deeply about the suffering of others, even when they could choose to stay apart. Tom, in his simplicity and integrity, made a difference without seeking recognition, leaving behind a legacy of courage, justice, and humanity. And so, Tom Cruise showed that even off-screen, the pursuit of justice can make a difference in people's lives. His courage in confronting an oppressive system brought hope to a community that had been exploited for so long. The fall of Vincent Crow was not just the end of a criminal scheme, but the beginning of a fairer future for all who suffered in that market. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and justice, leave your like, share your thoughts in the comments, and share it with those who need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss more impactful stories like this one.